Hello and welcome back. Now that we have our sign up create method, we have a lot inside here, but I think it's fine. What we want to do now is to create the routes. So possibly we'll create the route in this file and in the Auth service, and then go to the API gateway to add the route and the service as well. But first, in the source folder, create a routes folder. Okay, and here I'll call this auth. Okay, so in the routes, create another file called auth.ts. okay, now let us define the routes. I think we've not defined the route before. Okay, so we only defined this. Okay, so in the auth routes, that file we just created, let's create a router. I'll first import express and then import router from express. Okay, and then let's create our router of type router equal to express dot router. Okay, now let's just create a function. So export function, I'll say auth routes. Okay, this will return a router. Now the first route we want to create is the post route, the sign up post route. So this will be router.post, and then here we are going to use just /signup. In the main route file, we are going to add the other parts. Okay, but for now here we're only just going to define /signup. Okay, and then let's use the method, the controller method. So the controller is called create, so I will just pass the create here. Let me import it. Import create from controller signup, and then I want to return this router, so return router. Okay, this is just all we need to do right here for this, because we have only one route. Now let's go ahead and use it in the routes.ts file. Now I can remove this. Okay, this was just a placeholder, but first let me add const base parts base parts. Now the base part is going to be /API /v1/auth. Okay, so this is going to be the base part. Now there's something else we need to do. Let's go to our shared library. Remember, we already created this verify gateway request. Okay, but we are not using this at all. Let's see, did we even export this function? Let me try to see. Okay, I have it exported here. Okay, so it's fine. I can easily import. So what I need to do right now is to use this function. Okay, so go back here. Let me add the routes, auth routes. Okay, so I'll pass the auth route here. I need to import it, but first let me import the auth routes. Now here I'm going to use the base parts. Okay, so use the base parts right here. Now for the auth route, we need to pass in verify gateway request. Okay, this is just how we need to use this verify gateway request function. Okay, so @auth. So what this is simply going to do is it will check, okay, if the request going to the auth route, if it's coming from the API gateway. If it's not coming from the API gateway, it will reject the request. We're going to test that out. Okay, so this is how we need to use the or create our route. We already imported this. Now the next thing for us to do is let's go to our API gateway. Now we need to set up the service and also the route, auth routes in our API gateway service. Okay, so in your API gateway, go to source services. Now in the services folder, I'll create a new folder called API So this is where we're going to define all the services that will make the request to the microservices. Okay. So inside the API folder, create a new file. I'll call this auth.service.ts. Okay. Remember we already defined, or where did we define it? Here in Axios. So Axios, we need to create an instance because here we define the constructor. We need to create an instance and then pass in the base URL and then the service name. Okay. So here in the auth service, I will create a new class. I'll call this auth service. Okay. And then in the auth service, we can then export an instance. So export const auth service of type auth service equal to new auth service. Okay. So now here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a variable here. I'll export it. Let's Axios auth instance be of type. What is the type? Yeah, this is the type we want. Okay. Now we are not going to use the same Axios instance for all the services. So each service will have its own Axios instance. The reason for it is we need to add the API or the JWT token coming from the client that is added to the cookie session. We need to append it to the request that is going from the API gateway to the microservice, or in this case to the auth service. So the auth service will have its own Axios instance. The user service will have its own Axios instance. Okay. So here I'll say Axios service of type Axios service. I will change that later. Okay. Now we need a constructor. Okay, so that we can initialize some properties. This constructor will not take in any arguments. Okay. So what I'm going to do is this dot Axios service equal to new Axios service. And remember the Axios service, it takes in base URL and service name. Okay. So what is going to be the base URL? The base URL will be config. Let's import config dot auth base URL, then slash API slash v1 slash auth. And then what is the service name? The service name is auth. So this service name right here is what will be added as the request gateway token. Okay, we add it as the ID, we sign, and then we append it or add it to our headers. Okay, so this is the service name, and then here we are going to say Axios instance equal to this dot Axios service dot Axios. Okay, let me change this to at gateway slash services. Yeah, so at gateway slash services. Okay, so what I have done here is that I created a new Axios auth instance. Like I said, each service will have its own Axios instance. Now here, this is just a property of type Axios service, which is this service. And remember, when we instantiate a new object for this service, we need to pass in a base URL and a service name. Okay, so this dot Axios service is equal to new Axios service. We pass the base URL for our auth service, and then we pass in the service name. Okay, and then whatever is returned from here, because you can see Axios create instance returns an instance property. Okay, and then in that instance property we need the Axios. That is why Axios instance equal to this dot Axios service dot Axios. Okay, so this is what we need to do right here. Before we start adding some the methods that we are going to need, let's go to our server.ts file. We want to add a new middleware. Okay, now the purpose of this middleware is to add the bearer token. Okay, so when the request comes from the front end, and then before the API gateway sends the request to the respective service, in this case the Auth service, it's going to add the bearer token to the headers. Okay, and we are going to achieve that with app.use. Okay, and then here we pass request of type request, import from express, response of type response, import from express as well, and then we need next of type next function, import from express. Okay, and then what do we need to do? We're going to say if request.session contains JWT. Okay, if it contains the JWT token, now we want to append the token to this Axios instance. Remember, we are already exporting this. This is Axios Auth instance. So copy this. And how do you add to the headers? So I'll call, let me import this. So Axios Auth instance dot defaults dot headers. So if you want to use Axios to maybe you want to update dynamically or add a property to the headers dynamically, this is how you do it. And then what do we want to update? We want to update or add to the authorization header. And what do we want to add? We want to add a bearer token. The token is going to be this. Okay, and then outside we are going to call next. Okay, we don't need this, so we can put underscore. So with this right now, let me just make one change. Okay, so what's going to happen here is, before Axios makes a request to the authentication service, it's going to check if the request.session.jwt exists. If it does, then add it as a bearer token, add it to the authorization headers. Okay, and yeah, in the Auth service, we already implemented it, so we can check. If we go back to our Auth service, I think we already have the implementation. Yeah, this is where we are checking to verify the token. Okay, so when the request comes, we are still going to verify that it's a valid token. If it's not a valid token, we throw an error. Okay, we reject the request. If it's a valid token, we allow the request to proceed. So right now we've added this part. In the next video, we're going to add the methods we need into the Auth service.